Did you know that there were Yemeni sultans in the Philippines that fought a war against the Spanish for over 300 years?
Inspired by my brothers at Zahabi Jewelry, designing beautiful rings with deep cultural roots.
You see, after the death of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the Muslims began to expand the caliphate, putting heavy emphasis on building trade routes throughout the region. Soon enough, Muslim sailors from places like Somalia and Oman, and especially Yemen, were launching their boats at sea and setting sail to the far edges of the earth in search of people to trade with. They navigated the violent waters of the sea and charted the lands dotted across the oceans, and eventually these Muslims made it all the way to Southeast Asia, settling along the banks of Malaysia and Indonesia and creating small communities within the local societies. Soon the Muslims began doing trade with the locals, and many of the traders began teaching the locals Islam. One of the most important of these was Karim al-Makhdoom, a sailor of Yemeni descent. He traveled to the Sulu Islands of the neighboring Philippines and in 1380 introduced its people to Islam and built the nation's first masjid. Soon after, another sailor of Yemeni descent by the name of Sharif Abu Bakr al-Hashimi arrived in the islands and married the daughter of one of the rulers there. And when the ruler died in 1405, Sharif al-Hashimi became the new king, and the Sultanate of Sulu was born. Not long after this, a third Yemeni, locally called Sharif Kabungswang, meaning Sharif the youngest, began preaching Islam in the southern islands of Mindanao. There, he managed to convert many powerful families in the region to Islam and even forged alliances with them. And from this, he established the Sultanate of Maguindanao in 1520. These sailors of Yemeni descent now ruled over 2 Muslim sultanates in the Philippines, and Islam was quickly spreading across the rest of the neighboring islands. It seemed that just like Malaysia and Indonesia, the Philippines too would become a land of Muslim nations. But soon, that would all change, as one of the greatest enemies of the Muslims at that time was now making its way across the ocean, coming in from the other side. In 1492, less than 30 years earlier, the last bastion of Muslim civilization in Spain surrendered, and the Christian Reconquista had been completed. Over the next 100 years, the Muslims in the region were systematically forced to convert to Christianity and eventually even expelled from the peninsula. And it was during that time that the Spanish began colonizing lands around the world, reaching the Americas and traveling even further west from there. And by the early 1500s, they managed to land in the Philippines, where they were shocked at what they found. Somehow, these Yemeni Arabs had traveled all the way around the world and were already spreading Islam in lands they never even knew existed before. To the Spanish, these Yemeni Arabs and the new Filipino Muslims that they had converted were the same people that had ruled Spain for the last 800 years. And so they called them the same name, Moros, or as they're known in English, the Moors. The Spanish quickly began conquering island after island, and soon enough, most of the Philippine islands were under the control of the Spanish Empire. And with that, only the 2 sultanates remained. The Muslims fought back, repelling the Spanish with each attack. And for the next 333 years, the Spanish tried to subjugate the Muslims in the Philippines, winning some battles and losing others. But the spirit of the Muslims remained strong, and they never gave in. By 1898, the Spanish Empire was crumbling due to the many wars it was fighting around the world, and it seemed like the Muslims had actually managed to remain independent. But soon it would become clear that the fight was not over, as the next year the Americans invaded. Eventually, both the Sultanate of Sulu and Maguindanao would fall, and the US managed to colonize the Philippines in its entirety. But unlike in Spain, the Muslims of the Philippines never gave up their Islam. Till this day, the descendants of those Yemeni sailors and the Filipinos that converted still practice Islam in the Philippines, and there are over 7 million of them. And it all started with a few sailors from Yemen and their dream to bring Islam to the edge of the world. And in celebration of the history of those Yemeni sailors and the rich legacy they etched in stone, I teamed up with my brothers at Zahabi.co, who created their own line of men's rings inspired by the rich history of Yemeni sultans from around the world. My personal favorite was a black Kilij ring, which not only has a beautiful onyx stone set in the ring, but is also detailed with a traditional Janbiya dagger originating from the Hadramaut region of Yemen. Just click the link in my bio and go check them out.
And use the code OMAR10 for 10% off your order.
And as always, like a fall for more Muslim facts.